Okay, so this is week 1A, creating text, and we're delving into After Effects. And you should already have the software opened. So the first thing we're going to do is look at our bullet points. It says New Composition. So we'll go to Composition, New Composition, and this menu comes up. We want to make sure that we name it first. And so it's very important that we name it so that when you send it to me, I know whose is whose. We want to make sure that the preset is set to HDTV 1080 2997 square pixels, and then we want our duration to be 10 seconds. And if you don't know how to change it, obviously it's pretty self-explanatory, but we're going to go 10 seconds. Next thing we're going to do is import our picture of Mountaineer Field. So we can come over here, we can go to File, Import, File, and make sure you go to the area where your week 1 elements are and select Mountaineer Field. Navigate to it however you need be, Mountaineer Field, and open. You can also drag and drop if you want. Just drag it right here into this folder here. Next thing I want to do is make sure I have all my workspace panels open. So I'm going to go to Window, Workspace, and I want to make sure that all panels is check marked, just to kind of give you an idea of what the opposite looks like. That's the default setup, but we want to do all panels today. So Window, Workspace, all panels. Alright, so we're going to drag and drop the picture into the composition, and there's two ways you can do it. You can drag it into the composition like that, Command Z, or you can drag it into the timeline. I prefer dragging into the timeline, to be honest with you, but it does really make no difference. So this is kind of important. In the timeline, we're going to toggle the picture. When I say toggle the picture, that's this arrow here. Toggle gets used quite a bit, but when you say toggle, we're going to toggle down an arrow, toggle down. And this area here, transform, you will use it quite a bit. So we're going to toggle down transform, and these 5 elements come up, and they're very important, and you're going to use the majority of them throughout the course. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure our current time indicator, which is this blue arrow here, or CTI, or sometimes I'll call it the guitar pick because it looks kind of like a guitar pick, if you will. But the CTI, the current time indicator, is at the beginning. To change the scale to 33%. There's 2 ways you can do it. You can, because this chain link means both your X and your Y, your X and your Y, they're linked together. So your vertical and your horizontal. We're going to change it to 33. So I'm like dragging and holding, and I can make it 33. Oh, 34. You'll notice it's kind of tedious. Or I can click in the arrow, type 33, hit return, and because they're locked, both the X and the Y change to 33%. So that's what we want. So now we're going to make a keyframe here, because at this part of the timeline, this little stopwatch here, this is what creates your first keyframe. Diamond comes up, you have a keyframe, and at this position here, this photo will be at this scale. We're going to scrub, and that's grabbing the CTI, and click and hold. I'm going to go to the end here. We're going to change it to 41%. Click on it, type 41, hit return, and now you'll notice the photo has gotten bigger. So at this keyframe, it's at 33%. Hit the space bar, and it's almost like we're zooming into the photo. Give it a little bit of motion, if you will. This is real-time rendering. When the green line is full, it'll loop back, and it'll show you that we are rendering. We are also working at full resolution. Full resolution means that we're seeing the best quality it can do. If you change your resolution on your composition, it'll work faster. Hit the spacebar to stop. So if we want to work at quarter resolution, you'll notice not as nice, but things work and render a little faster because we're only using 1/4 the amount of RAM. So So we've zoomed in, but it's not really centered. Notice it's not really centered to where I want it to be. So I'm going to change the position. So at the beginning, timeline, toggle pick, transform. This time we're doing position. At the beginning, make sure the X is at 960, and it is. So we're working on position. X is at 960. I'm going to hit a keyframe here. I'm going to go to the end of the timeline, and then you'll notice it's not locked. Positions are never locked. I'm going to change 960 to 1160. And you'll notice the press box stays in frame, the picture doesn't leave, and so that when we zoom in, we're keeping our press box in frame. And it's more of a centered shot zooming in on the Gold Rush photo of Mountaineer Field. Take the CTI back to the beginning. And we're going to select the text tool. And this next thing, and this is the text tool, which is the letter Z or the letter T. The text tool is the letter T. And this is very important. And that's why do not is in all caps. Do not make a text box. This is a text box. And then we're going to type text inside here like that. We don't want to do that. We just want to type text onto our composition. So I'm just going to go here. I'm going to click and I'm going to type let's go Mountaineers. Double click the text in the timeline to highlight it. So I'm going to double click it. You'll notice now that my text is highlighted in red. Now my text is highlighted in red. You'll notice I changed the window from 33 to 50%. Things are a little bit bigger. If I go to 100%, by the way, I'm zoomed in, I can see everything. I can change this to full, but I'm not seeing my whole picture. So you can always do a fit, and now it's at 73.1%. See how much, and if I move my window up and down, it's going to rise and go with my workspace. So now it says Let's Go Mountaineers. Click on Comp window and type text Let's Go Mountaineers. Make sure your text is your top layer in your timeline. So we've done that. So we have two layers in our timeline. This is on top, this is on bottom. If we flip-flop them, you'll notice the text goes away. Why? Because the text is below the photo. If you want to see, If you want to see the photo, turn it off. There's our text. Kind of see it. Transparencies, stuff like that. This is a transparency menu, just for your working pleasure. If you're working, you want a black solid background to work with, great. If you want to work with your transparent background, you can. But we want Mountaineer Field to be on the bottom. We're going to use this eyeball. Turns things on and off, on and off. I want to see Mountaineer Field. I don't want to see Mountaineer Field. So now we're going to select our text, double click, highlight it. And we want to character. So we go over to our character menu. I'm going to change the font to Impact. I'm going to change it to Calicia now just so you can see the difference. But I can go here and type in IMP and Impact will come up. Make sure you select it. You'll notice that the double T's are selected because I have it in all caps. Now I can turn off the text. It has I texted it, but I want all caps. I can italicize it. I can make it bolder. But for today's lesson, we're going to make sure it's in all caps. We want to change the text of the size of the font to 115. And much like what we learned earlier, click it, type 115, and it'll go to 115. Spacing. You can do whatever you want with spacing. These are spacing fonts. You'll notice when I play with this, the letters are closer, farther, closer, farther. I'm going to change it back to 0, which is the default setting. And if we want to make the text wider, thinner, wider, thinner, I want to do the regular 100%. Next is the Align tool. And you're going to use the Align tool quite a bit through this course, so the sooner you get to know it, the better. If you don't see it, you'll notice I have the Align tool here. But if you don't see it, you can always go to Window and notice it's check mark. You can always, if you don't see it, and I turn the check mark off, you go to Window, click this check mark, Align, and now the Align tool is going to show up. So just kind of remember this. Anytime you're working on an element, you have to have it selected in your timeline. So I want to work with my text, and now the Align tool has come up. And we can align left, align center, horizontally center, we can align it right, we can align it top, vertically centered, and bottom. So for obvious reasons, we want to align it horizontally centered, and we want to highlight it vertically centered. So now we know it's completely and totally in the middle of our composition. Align, get to know it. I'm going to scrub 3 seconds into my timeline. 1, 2, and you'll notice this 3 seconds here, right there, like that. 3 seconds. If I want to expand, this arrow down here will expand it, and now I'm seeing frames by frames by frames. And now I can go one image at a time. But for today, we're going to stick to the basics. We're going to go to 3 seconds. Now, I want to go to Windows, Effects and Presets, Animation Presets, Text, Animate In, Fade Up Characters, Drag and Drop. That's the bullet point we're on. Windows, Effects and Presets, Animation Presets, Text, Animate In, Fade Up Characters, Drag and Drop. So I want my effects and presets, and I don't see it over here anywhere. So I want to go to Window, and it's not turned on, Effects and Presets. And I'm going to do a new search. This time I'm going to go to Animation Presets, Toggle. Remember that word, Toggle. Animation Presets, Text, Animate In, and Fade Up Characters. And if you can't see it, you can always do this. You can always slide left and right like this. But I'm going to do Fade Up Characters. 2 ways I can do it. This is selected because this is where I want to put the Fade Up Characters on. I can double click it, and it's there. Now I can see my whole timeline. Command Z, undo, or I can drag and drop. Now make sure you're sitting at the effect you're setting will start wherever your current time indicator is located. So if you go back here and you put up fade up characters, the characters will start to fade up there. But we want them to start to fade up around 3 seconds. So I'm going to drag and drop it onto there. And now it'll start to fade up. It's about a 2-second fade. You can adjust it if you want, and I'll go over that in future lessons. Now I want to do a drop shadow, because you'll notice that not a lot of separation between Let's Go Mountaineers and the picture itself. So we want it to kind of pop. So with a drop shadow, you add it anywhere. Find drop shadow, we go to Effects and Presets, drop shadow. There it is. I'm just going to have, because I have this selected, I'm just going to double click it this time. And now our effect controls window comes up, and you'll use this window quite often. When you add an effect like such, drop shadow, you want to make sure it's at full capacity, and maybe we'll give it a little bit of distance. Notice I can change the distance all the way down there, no distance whatsoever. So I just want to put some separation in there. You can change your distance to anything. So now we have a little bit of separation. So now what we want to do, and this is on page 2, layer, new, solid. Layer, new, solid. Color palette comes up. You can make it anything you want. For today's lesson, we want it to be black, and I'll explain why, but definitely make it a black solid, which is straight zeros if you're working with hex codes, and that's what these are called, hex codes. Click OK. Now I have a black solid, and I'm going to put it as my bottom layer. So now I have 3 layers: text, photo of Mountaineer Field, black solid. So now we're going to go back to our timeline, select photo, place the CTI at 3 seconds. And what I want is to make my image, I want it to kind of lose some opacity or fade out a little bit, make it darker so that the text will pop a little bit better. Once the photo is selected, we're going to, here we go, toggle, transform. We're going to set a keyframe at opacity because it's at 100%. It's as bright as it can be in terms of just basically bringing it in. So our opacity is at 100%. Keyframe there. I'm going to go forward about 2 seconds because that's when the text stops affecting in. And from here, I'm going to change my opacity to 50. And you will notice once you set that first keyframe, any kind of changes you make later, a keyframe will happen. So we're at 3 seconds. Really, it wasn't at 3 seconds. Let's move that keyframe over to 3, right on. And I'm going to hit the letter K on my keyboard, and boom, it takes me right to my next keyframe in my timeline. Show you that again. I'm going to go back here, hit the K button. There, I'm at that keyframe. I'm going to hit K again, and it'll line up my CTI right at this keyframe. Wonderful tool. So now, you'll notice Mountaineer Field is getting a little bit darker to kind of add to that. And the reason we do that with the solid is if I didn't have the solid, you'll notice transparencies come out. When you render it, sometimes it gets transparent, sometimes it goes with the dark background, but with the black solid there, even though I don't have transparencies on and on, it's for rendering purposes. So we use the black solid. If you wanted your photo to get a little bit blue, maybe you make your black solid a blue solid, but for today's lesson, we are going to have a black solid. I'm going to change this. I'm going to hit render. Oh, and now we've made text on top of our image. Great.